Right now, the United States is walking straight into one of the most complex and dangerous weather setups of the entire summer, and the vast majority of Americans have absolutely no idea what is building directly above their heads. Tonight, tornado warnings are active across multiple states. A heat dome so powerful that temperatures are pushing past 115 degrees Fahrenheit is baking the American West and Southwest with a ferocity that emergency rooms are struggling to keep pace with. And out in the Atlantic Ocean, something is stirring. Something that the National Hurricane Center is watching very carefully. That has the potential to reshape the entire weather pattern across the country for the rest of August. This is not a slow-moving story. This is not a situation where you have days to prepare and think through your options. The window between right now and when some of these systems become directly dangerous to millions of Americans is measured in hours, not days. Stay with me, because in the next several minutes I am going to walk you through exactly what is happening, exactly where the danger is, exactly when it arrives, and exactly what you need to know to keep yourself and your family safe through what is shaping up to be one of the most active and most dangerous weather periods this country has seen all summer long. Let us start with the severe weather that is on the ground and active right now, because this is the most immediate threat for tens of millions of Americans tonight and into tomorrow. A powerful storm system has been tracking across the central United States, and the atmospheric setup underneath it is producing exactly the kind of conditions that meteorologists lose sleep over. Warm, incredibly moist air flowing northward from the Gulf of Mexico, colliding with a cold front pushing down from Canada, with a jet stream positioned directly overhead that is providing the wind shear necessary to turn ordinary thunderstorms into something far more dangerous. What that combination produces is supercell thunderstorms, the most violent and most organized form of thunderstorm that exists in the atmosphere. And those supercells are capable of producing large, long-track tornadoes that can stay on the ground for miles and miles, destroying everything in their path with wind speeds that can exceed 200 miles per hour. Tonight, the tornado threat is focused across a corridor that includes Missouri, western Illinois, and extending down into parts of the Central Plains. This is not a slight risk. This is not a situation where meteorologists are saying there's a small chance something might develop. The atmospheric setup tonight has all the classic signatures of a significant tornado outbreak. The moisture is there, the instability is there, the wind shear is there, and the trigger mechanism is moving through at exactly the right time of day to maximize the threat during the evening hours when storms tend to reach their peak intensity. The most dangerous window tonight runs from roughly 5 in the afternoon through midnight, with the peak threat concentrated during the evening hours when the atmosphere is most unstable and the supercells are most likely to produce significant rotation. The cities and communities that need to be paying closest attention tonight include populations across eastern Missouri and western Illinois, where the combination of atmospheric ingredients is most favorable for the most significant tornado development. If you live in any of these areas, this is not a night to be casual about the weather. This is a night to know exactly where your shelter location is before the storms arrive. Basements are your best option. Get to the lowest floor, get to an interior room away from windows, and get there before the warning is issued, not after. A tornado warning gives you on average between 8 and 13 minutes of lead time. That sounds like enough time, but when you factor in the time to hear the warning, process what you are hearing, gather your family, and physically move to a shelter location, that window closes extraordinarily fast. Know where you're going before tonight's storms arrive, and be ready to move the moment a warning is issued for your county. Tomorrow, the severe weather threat does not end. It shifts. As the storm system tracks eastward overnight, the threat zone moves with it. Saturday brings a renewed tornado risk across Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, with the threat extending into northern Alabama through the afternoon and evening hours. This is actually the part of the storm system's evolution that concerns meteorologists most, because the ingredients for significant tornadoes on Saturday are going to be at least as favorable as they are tonight, and in some ways potentially more favorable as the system taps into even richer Gulf moisture as it moves eastward. The afternoon and evening hours on Saturday are going to require close attention from everyone across Kentucky, Tennessee, and northern Alabama. Multiple rounds of supercells are possible, and with each round comes a renewed tornado threat and a significant damaging wind threat that could affect communities that do not see a tornado but still experience dangerous straight-line winds. By Sunday, the severe weather threat has pushed further east still, reaching into the Carolinas and Virginia. This is a situation where the storm system is going to affect a very large portion of the country over a 3-day window. Tonight, across the central Midwest, tomorrow across the Mid-South, and Sunday across the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. For anyone along this entire corridor, this is a weekend that requires situational awareness and a weather app that has push notifications turned on. The atmosphere is not giving anyone a pass this weekend. Wherever you are from Missouri to the Carolinas, there's a window over the next 72 hours where your weather turns dangerous, And knowing when that window opens for your specific location is the difference between being prepared and being caught completely off guard. Now let us talk about the heat, because while the severe weather threat gets most of the attention this weekend, the heat dome that has been locked over the American West and Southwest for the past several weeks is not going anywhere. And the temperatures it is producing are genuinely and immediately life-threatening for a huge portion of the American population. Across the Southwest, across Arizona, Nevada, and into California, temperatures are running at 115 degrees Fahrenheit and above. Death Valley has recorded temperatures that rank among the highest ever measured on the surface of this planet, and what makes this heat dome particularly deadly is not just the peak temperatures during the afternoon hours. It is the fact that overnight temperatures are failing to drop below 80 degrees Fahrenheit across large portions of the desert Southwest. That matters enormously for human health, because the human body uses nighttime hours to recover from the heat stress of the day. When overnight temperatures stay above 80 degrees, that recovery never happens. The body enters the next day already stressed, already depleted, and significantly more vulnerable to the additional heat loading of the following afternoon. After multiple consecutive days of this pattern, which is exactly what the Southwest has been experiencing, the cumulative physiological toll becomes severe and in many cases fatal. Across the South Central, across Texas, Oklahoma, and extending into Louisiana and Arkansas, heat index values are running well above 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat index is what the temperature actually feels like to the human body when you factor in the humidity, and a heat index of 110 degrees means that your body's cooling system, its ability to shed heat through sweating and evaporation, is severely compromised. At these values, heat exhaustion can develop in healthy adults within an hour of outdoor exertion, and heat stroke, a genuine medical emergency that can cause organ failure and death, can occur with terrifying speed. If you are in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, or Arkansas this weekend, outdoor work and outdoor activity need to be scheduled for the very early morning hours when temperatures are at their lowest, with a hard stop well before the heat of the afternoon. Hydration is not optional. Air conditioning access is not optional. And if you see someone showing signs of heat exhaustion, dizziness, heavy sweating, weakness, fast pulse, get them into a cool environment immediately and call emergency services. The heat extends much further north than most people are expecting this weekend. Temperatures across Montana and into the northern Rockies are running into the 90s and touching 100 degrees in some locations. Temperatures that are genuinely shocking for communities at those latitudes and elevations, and that infrastructure and populations in those areas are not designed or acclimatized to handle. When extreme heat arrives in regions where air conditioning penetration is low, where elderly populations are less likely to have adequate cooling access, and where the cultural baseline for heat safety behaviors has not been developed because these temperatures have historically never occurred in those places, the public health risk is particularly acute. The northern Rockies and the high plains need to be taking this weekend's heat as seriously as Phoenix and Las Vegas take their summer heat, because the impact on populations that are not acclimatized to these temperatures is potentially just as severe. Now, the piece of this weekend's weather story that has the biggest implications for the rest of August, the piece that goes well beyond this weekend and shapes what the entire back half of summer looks like for the United States, is what is happening in the tropics. Because right now, out in the Atlantic and in the Caribbean, something is developing that has the potential to become the dominant weather story of the next several weeks. And the atmospheric pattern that governs weather and how that tropical development occurs is shifting in a way that creates a very specific window of opportunity for storm formation that everyone needs to understand. The National Hurricane Center is currently monitoring 4 separate tropical waves in the Atlantic and Caribbean. 4. That is an unusually high number of systems to be watching simultaneously. And while most of them are not expected to develop into organized tropical cyclones in the short term, the sheer volume of tropical activity in the basin is itself a signal of just how energetically charged the Atlantic atmosphere is right now. Sea surface temperatures along the entire east coast of the United States are running between 85 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures that are not just warm enough to sustain a tropical system, but warm enough to provide the kind of explosive energy release that allows storms to intensify rapidly. In the Bahamas and extending into the Gulf of Mexico, sea surface temperatures are running into the high 80s and in some locations approaching 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Those are extraordinary numbers. Those are numbers that represent a reservoir of thermal energy that any organized tropical system passing over those waters would be able to tap into with devastating effect. The atmospheric pattern governing tropical development over the next 10 days divides into a very clear structure that everyone watching the tropics needs to understand. From now through approximately August 5th, the atmosphere over the Atlantic is being dominated by strong wind shear. upper-level winds that are blowing in a different direction and at a different speed than the lower-level winds, creating a hostile environment for tropical development that essentially tears apart any storm trying to organize. During this window, the tropical waves that are currently moving westward across the Atlantic are going to struggle to develop into anything significant. The shear is too strong, the dry air from the Saharan air layer is too extensive, and the atmospheric dynamics are simply not supporting organization. This is actually good news for the short term. It means that the next several days are likely to remain free of significant tropical threats. But here is where the situation changes, and changes in a way that demands close attention. Between approximately August 6th and August 10th, that atmospheric shear relaxes significantly. The pattern shifts into what meteorologists call a zonal flow, a configuration where the upper-level winds are weaker and more organized. The hostile shear over the tropical Atlantic decreases, and the windows for tropical development open up in a way that they have not been open during July and the first days of August. This is the window. This is the period of days where the atmospheric conditions align in a way that gives any organized tropical wave the opportunity it needs to develop, intensify, and potentially become something significant. And there are tropical waves right now, several of them, that are going to be arriving at the right place at roughly the right time to take advantage of exactly this window. The specific scenario that the models are trying to resolve right now involves a tropical wave that could approach the lesser developed region of the Western Atlantic and Caribbean during this August 6th through 10th window. If the wave is strong enough, if the dry air from the Saharan dust layer has sufficiently cleared, and if the atmospheric setup supports development, this system has the potential to develop into a tropical depression or tropical storm during this window. What happens after that, where it goes, how strong it gets, who feels its impacts, depends on a set of variables that the models are currently handling in two very different ways, and understanding that model disagreement is crucial for understanding why this situation requires such close watching over the next week. The American model, the GFS, is painting a more aggressive scenario. It shows a stronger trough of low pressure developing across Canada during this window, a feature that would dig southward and create a steering flow that could grab a developing tropical system and pull it northward along or near the east coast of the United States. In this scenario, a storm that develops in the Western Atlantic during the August 6th through 10th window could undergo rapid intensification as it moves over the extraordinarily warm sea surface temperatures along the east coast, potentially reaching hurricane strength before being swept out to sea by the jet stream. This scenario has echoes of previous East Coast near-miss situations where storms developed rapidly and moved through faster than communities had time to prepare for. The European model, which has a strong track record for accuracy at longer ranges, is considerably more conservative. It shows a weaker trough, a less organized steering flow, and significantly more dry air remaining in the Atlantic that would inhibit development and prevent the kind of rapid intensification the American model is showing. In the European model's solution, the tropical waves during this window remain poorly organized, producing at most some tropical moisture and rainfall enhancement, but no significant tropical cyclone development. This is the scenario that current trends are most aligned with. The dry air signal is real, the Saharan air layer is extensive, and the European model's conservatism is supported by the Canadian model, which is showing a similar solution. There is, however, a third scenario that deserves serious attention, even though it is not the most likely outcome right now. If the tropical wave remains weak and disorganized during the Atlantic window, if the shear and dry air prevent East Coast development, the system does not simply dissipate. It continues moving westward, carried by the trade winds and the steering flow of the high-pressure system that dominates the subtropical Atlantic. In this scenario, the wave could push into the Gulf of Mexico during the latter part of this window, where it would encounter sea surface temperatures in the mid-80s and an atmospheric environment that is potentially more favorable for development than the Atlantic. While Gulf storms are notoriously difficult to predict, because the Gulf is a relatively small body of water, where storms can intensify rapidly over short distances, potentially giving affected coastal communities very little lead time before a significant weather threat arrives. After August 10th, the atmospheric pattern shifts again, back toward a configuration that favors the heat ridge over the western United States, and brings another trough of cooler air and storm potential along the east coast. This back and forth pattern, high pressure and heat dominating one week, a cooler trough pushing through the next, is the overall structure that governs the rest of August. And within that structure, the windows where the atmosphere relaxes enough for tropical development are exactly the periods that need to be watched most carefully. The ocean is warm enough to support significant storms. The atmosphere is going to give those storms their chances. The question of whether those chances lead to significant impacts on the United States coastline is one that the next 7 to 10 days will answer. The broader significance of what is happening right now in the tropics extends beyond any single storm or any single window of development. The sea surface temperatures along the entire East Coast and across the Gulf of Mexico are at or near record levels for this time of year, and they are going to stay elevated through the peak of hurricane season, which statistically runs from mid-August through mid-October. Every tropical wave that moves off the African coast and into the Atlantic for the next 6 weeks is going to encounter an ocean surface that is warmer than it has historically been during this time of year. And that extra warmth translates directly into more energy available for storm development and intensification. Storms that in previous decades might have remained disorganized tropical systems have the thermal fuel available to them right now to develop into significant tropical cyclones with much less atmospheric support than would historically have been required. This is the background condition against which every tropical weather update for the rest of the summer needs to be understood. The ocean is loaded, and every system that gets even a brief window of favorable atmospheric conditions has the potential to tap into that energy in ways that can surprise even experienced forecasters. What all of this means for the average person across the United States over the next 10 to 14 days is a weather picture that requires sustained attention and sustained preparedness across multiple simultaneous threats. Tonight and through the weekend, the severe weather across the Midwest and Mid-South demands immediate attention from anyone in the threat corridor. The tornado threat is real, it is active, and it requires shelter planning and situational awareness right now. Simultaneously, the heat across the west and southwest and into the south central is going to continue claiming lives among the most vulnerable: the elderly, the very young, outdoor workers, and anyone without reliable access to air conditioning. And watching quietly in the background, building slowly in the Atlantic, is a tropical threat that has the potential to become the dominant weather story of the next several weeks, depending on how the atmospheric setup evolves during the August 6th through 10th window. The United States is entering one of the most complex and most dangerous periods of the 2026 weather year, and the time to be paying attention is right now, not when the tornado warning is on your phone, not when the heat index reaches 115 degrees, and someone in your household is showing symptoms of heat exhaustion, and not when a tropical storm is 48 hours from your coastline. The time is right now, while there is still time to plan, to prepare, and to make decisions that matter. Stay close to your local forecasts this weekend. Have a shelter plan for the severe weather. Have a heat plan for the temperatures that are coming. And keep watching the tropics, because the ocean is warm, the atmosphere is charged, and August is just getting started.